Hey, it's Kat, and I'm back because what once was will be again, and that's the entire point of, or one of the many points of Mr. Martin's series, A Game of Fire and Ice, in our program Game of Thrones. So, previous video about the church and the state and the rise of the seven-pointed star, I talked about my prediction of Bloody Queen Margery. And in the other one video regarding history and the rise of the church, where Justinian and Constantine were the catalysts for bringing the church into the state and the rise of the Christian church in the West. And now, in reality, we see that in more modern history, where Ibn al-Saud rose the Wahhabi Brotherhood, and now we're still dealing with the remnants of that even today. So here's what we're going to talk about, though, on Bloody Queen Margery. So historically, aside from the rise of the church, there was this moment when the church in England hit its zenith. So in England, which is Westeros is based on, the church was always sort of in the background, involved in the affairs of the state, and quite often advisors to the kings were cardinals or bishops. And there was this struggle about who was going to be appointed to these positions, because, you know, the king wanted someone who was loyal to him, and the Pope, of course, wanted his own men that were loyal to the church. And, you know, by that means he could possibly influence the politics in England. And this was why the kings didn't want these guys to be their appointed by the Pope, because they didn't want that interference. The Pope was a long way away in Rome, and he, you know, had a lot of alliances with the other European countries like France and Germany and such. And England was quite often at odds with these folks. So historically, that was what was in the background. But at the same time, Protestantism was on the rise. The Gutenberg press had come about, and it started printing the Bible in English, and you know, millions of copies. People could finally read for themselves, and so different sects began to rise up about the faith. And Edward VIII, he was concerned about his legacy and the fact that he didn't have an heir to the throne. He had two girls, Princess Mary and Princess Elizabeth, and he remembered the Wars of the Roses, and he was very certain that if he didn't have a male to sit on the throne, that these wars would come back to haunt them, and everything that he had built and his, you know, future posterity of his family would go up in flames. So he kept trying to get a male heir, and one of the things he did was he tried to divorce Catherine of Aragon, and he did end up eventually divorcing her, but the Pope did not give him this dispensation. He'd asked his Bishop of Canterbury to go and talk to the Pope. Who knows if he was trying to be convincing or not, because he was Catholic and didn't really believe in that. But the Pope said no, and Henry VIII said, "Up yours." And he declared himself the head of the church in England. And at that moment, some real events started happening. He actually took power. If they didn't accept him as the head of the state, he would he would tear down their abbeys and their monasteries, and he would take all their treasure and their money, because these places were extremely wealthy. They were like their own noble houses in the land. So he just took their money. He took everything. He imprisoned anybody or killed anybody who resisted him, and he took the control of the church. Not that the church was done, because people were still Catholic, and even though he was, you know, turning towards making it Protestant and the Anglican church, it wasn't like everybody was converted in an instant. So the church as it was still out there. But he did get his divorce, and eventually he did get his male heir. And his male heir, Edward VI, was very weak, and he ended up dying at 16 from some sort of disease. And it left everybody in a quandary, because since he'd beheaded Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth's mother, and she was tainted a traitor, we can't do Elizabeth. And since he divorced Queen Catherine of Aragon, then Mary had been made a bastard. But Henry VIII had, prior to his son taking the throne, had changed his mind, and he put in, just in case, a law for the succession of England's throne. And it did say that his daughters could inherit the throne, but everybody had pretty much ignored that to put Edward on the throne. But when he died, they had to make a decision. So they went back to this law, and they said, okay, then Queen Mary's first, and we'll bring her to the throne, and that's going to be that. Well, and she had a lot of Catholic supporters, because Catherine of Aragon was very devout Catholic. Mary was a very devout Catholic. She became more so after her father and mother's divorce, and her mother died of cancer, they believe, of the stomach. It was a really terrible death. And so she came to the throne, but her thing was, once she was on the throne, she was pretty sure that people were going to try to overthrow her, because Protestants had not just disappeared, because Catholicism came to the fore. So she thought that anytime any of these Protestants were agitating for religious freedom, that it meant that they were probably plotting to take her off the throne and put her sister Elizabeth on the throne. And what she did is she put Elizabeth in the Tower. Mark that down. Queen Mary put Elizabeth in the Tower. She didn't kill her, because to kill her was to kill a princess or a royal blood. And if you kill royal blood, it opens the door, the precedent for killing maybe her. Because if you kill one, it's okay to kill the other. So she just threw her in the Tower. But at the same time, she was not going to just let these Protestants keep running around and maybe get ready to throw her off the throne. So there was the great Bloody Queen Mary, who her men began to round up people, and they would try them on mostly the flimsiest of excuses, and then they would be burned at the stake for treason and heresy. And, it depends on what history you read. It could have been hundreds, it could have been thousands. Nobody knows for sure, because they weren't really keeping like the most awesome records there. But it was enough that when she did this, that it freaked people out so badly, that when she died and Elizabeth came to the throne, Elizabeth got the message that she had to be the head of the church. So she took the power as the head of the church, and then she basically finished the reform of the church. She said, we're Anglican. This is what we're going to do. You are going to give the sermons in English, because that's what we speak here. And she basically said, these are the things that are going to happen. And she didn't have to work too hard at it, because really Bloody Queen Mary had so horrified people that it had totally changed their view of the church and the state being one. The power of the church to be so destructive just could not stand. And so as she slowly pushed the church back down to a subordinate position, it changed the entirety of religion in England. And you saw that the final flames that burned off the conquering aspect of Christianity in the church, and it became the kinder, gentler church of faith and mercy and the mother. So that didn't mean that saints went away. There are still saints, but you didn't pray to them directly for intercession. In fact, St. George, the Dragon Slayer, became the patron saint of England. And you mark my words on this, because I am making a prediction. It will be Jorrah Mormont that kills the dragon, and he will become Saint Jorrah of Westeros. Saint Jorrah. Mark my words, the Dragon Slayer. So there you go. There's a quick why Margery is going to become Queen Mary. So we see that here, because there's nothing like a convert to become a fanatic. Once she has that power in her hands, the power of the church to transform and make people obey. She had no power by herself. She's basically somebody else, and she's going to take it through the church, and it is going to be ugly and nasty. Thanks very much. I'll talk to you all later. Have a good one.